This week we're going to be talking about metric and household measurements. The first thing we're going to do is you should go and print off the instruction sheets for this week and follow along. Again, it'll be much easier to understand what I'm talking about if you have them in your hand. There's the first page, so that's what you want to print off, and then you can follow along with me. Okay, so the metric and household measurements, you're going to be learning about weight and volume. You're not going to be concerned with length, okay? That's more for people who are dealing with children and, things like that you're not concerned with. We're talking simply about medication. We're just going to be talking about weight for our tablets and volume for our liquids in the medications, all right? The metric system, remember, is the system of choice, the one that is primarily used because it's accurate and it's simple, all right? So, metric, accurate and simple, all right? The household we think is easy for us to use because we know about teaspoons and tablespoons, but in medicine, that's not accurate enough. You need to be using the metric system, okay? And the one big thing about the metric system, no fractions. Okay, it's not accurate enough, which is why we learned all the things we learned about changing a fraction to a decimal, all right? So when you're looking at the page, page 1, it shows you some examples. You're not going to say a half, you're going to say 0.5. You're not going to refer to a quarter of a pill, you're going to say 0.25, okay? So actually I want to put these in order, so let's change them. 0.25 is what we use for 1/4, a quarter of a pill. 0.5 is what we use for a half a tablet. 0.75 would be 3/4 of a tablet. All right, these you should memorize. If you don't already know it, memorize them. All right, very important, because like I said, we're not going to use fractions, so anytime you come across a fraction, you have to convert it. These are the most common ones you're going to see. Think of this in terms of money, all right? 1/4. It's 1/4 of a dollar, right? You need 4 quarters to make a dollar. 0.5. 0.5 is a half. If you have 50 cents, there's an unseen zero there, okay? But we don't have to think of that there, okay? 0.5, 1/2. So 50 cents, half a dollar. 0.75, if you have 75 cents, you have 3 quarters. You have 3/4 of a dollar. All right, so it should make kind of sense to do that. Next thing, if you look down on that page, you're going to see prefixes. So the big things that we're using for measurements of weight and volume, for weight, we're going to use gram as the basic unit, all right? Gram, the abbreviation is just a plain old lowercase g. And for volume, which we use for liquids, you're going to be using the basic unit of volume in the metric system is a liter, which is large L, okay? Liter, like a 2-liter bottle of soda, abbreviated by a large L, okay? Then you're going to see on that same page that there are prefixes we put in front of the gram or the liter to show you by multiples of 10 smaller doses. So gram is your largest dose. Liter is your largest dose of each of these measurements. And then you get smaller and smaller, and you have the words micro, and you have milli, and you have, well, actually I'm not going to go beyond that because that gets into the length, and I don't want to do length. So micro, a microgram. And the abbreviation for microgram is MCG. The abbreviation for a milligram is just mg, okay? All lowercase, all right? I'm gonna erase my this part here so I can give myself some more room here. Okay, so let's just talk about liter for a second. So liter, the prefix in front of that you're going to see a lot is milliliter. Okay, this is abbreviated small m, large capital L. All right, so those are your abbreviations. You're going to see mcg for microgram, mg for milligram, ml for milliliter. Okay, and you just have to remember that liter refers to liquids. Think of your L's. L in liter, L for liquid. That's how you're going to measure liquids. You're going to measure tablets by weight, so that's your gram. Typically medication is given in milligrams. However, one common microgram, and that's mg, one common microgram medication is a thyroid medication. They're typically measured in micrograms. Very small dosages. Okay? All right. All of that is going to be found on your next page in your instruction sheet in the box at the top, box 6-1, that says common metric measures. All right? And you'll notice that I crossed off the very first one that said 1,000,000 micrograms is equal to a gram. And that's because, as I said, you're very, very rare would you ever have to deal with a gram and be dividing it into 1,000,000 tiny little micrograms. So I cut that right out, okay? You're left with 1,000 micrograms equals 1 milligram, and 1,000 milligrams equals 1 gram, okay? Don't worry about the next one. I should have crossed that out. The 1,000 grams equals a kilogram. Again, that is for more for measuring like infants and stuff. So we're not going to do that. It doesn't pertain to medication. These are your two important things. You need to memorize those, okay? And what you need to realize is that there's an order here of things, of how large they are to how small, but it's all done by multiples of 10. So in other words, look at micrograms. It takes 1,000 of them to make 1 milligram. So microgram is your smallest unit. If you multiply it by 1,000, you're going to come to your milligrams. It takes 1,000 of those to get to a gram. So here's your decimal system at its best. And this is what metric is based off of. 1,000 micrograms equals a milligram. 1,000 milligrams equals a gram. Those are the things you need to memorize for the exam. Not this first exam coming up this week, the second one, okay? I'll reiterate this at the end, but your first exam this week is not any of the stuff I'm teaching today. It's the stuff that we had in the first 2 weeks of the class, all right? All right, so the reason you have to know all this is because, as I said, there may come a time where you're going to give a patient a medication and you're supposed to be giving, it says in the administration record that they get 300 milligrams of some medication. But you look at the bottle, and the bottle has the medication as grams, okay? Or vice versa. They want you, the medication is in grams. In fact, that's probably more what you have to do, is the medication will say it's only available in grams, but they want you to give 300 milligrams. How are you going to do that if it's only available in grams? You have to know how many grams equals 300 milligrams. That's where all this comes into play. So this is where we use the proportion method. And this is what I showed you last week with ratios and proportions. So now it'll all make sense. This is what you have to do. So if you're looking on the instruction sheet on page 2, under right in the middle, metric conversions proportion method. Example number 1 says 300 milligrams equals how many grams? Okay, so again, we're supposed to administer 300 milligrams of medication to a patient, but in our bottle, the pills are in grams. What are you going to do? All right, you have to convert the milligrams to grams, or the grams in this case to milligrams, and then you'll know how much to give the patient. So we need a proportion. Remember, a proportion is 2 ratios. All right, so and you're following along with me on your instruction sheet here. Number A, or letter A, says on the left side of the proportion, place what you know to be an equivalent between milligrams and grams. Okay, this is what you know right here. All right, you know that 1,000 milligrams is equal to, all right, is to 1 gram. Now, the right side of your proportion here, and then you're going to put just as, and then you need something here. And that is what we're trying to figure out. All right, what is 300 milligrams equal to? All right, so the very next thing is to put another ratio on this side, still using the same abbreviations. Okay, so what you're going to do is put milligrams that you know over here. The right side of the equation is going to be the part that you're not sure of. You know you have 300 milligrams. You don't know how many grams you have. Now, one thing I want to say here, whatever you do on the left-hand side of this, the order that you put your abbreviations in, you must put them the same way on the right-hand side after your just as sign. So you need to put something milligrams is as something grams. All right, go back to your problem. You know you have 300 milligrams. Okay, fill that in here. But you don't know how many grams. That's your X. All right, last week we were solving for X in the homework. Now we're doing the same thing, but we're actually doing it, you know, in a way that would relate to medication. Okay, and you have to find the grams there. Okay, so milligrams first on the left-hand side of the equation in front of the double dots there, 2 colons if you will. Milligrams has to be first on this side too. Grams comes after your just as. Same thing over here. Grams is second. Milligrams, grams, milligrams, grams. If you did this backwards and put grams and milligrams, you'd mess up everything. So it's really, really important that you do it correctly. All right, the next step, if you're following along on page 2, they get rid of the abbreviations just to make this easier to understand. So you have 1,000 is to 1, just as 300 is to X. This is what you had in last week's homework. Very simple. You know what to do. You're going to multiply the means so that they equal the extremes. And remember, the ends, extremes are the ends, means are the middle, the M for the middle, E for the ends. You remember you always want to put X on the left side of your equation. So 1,000X equals 1 times 300 is 300. All right, we want to know what 1x is, not 1,000x. So in order to get 1x over here, we have to divide it by 1,000. Whatever we do on one side of the equation, we do on the other side. Divide that by 1,000. So 1x equals, you're going to use your calculator here, 300 divided by 1,000, I promise you, when you put it into your calculator, comes out to 0.3. And then the very last thing you need to do, what were we looking for? We were looking for grams, so you have to put your abbreviation back on. X is 0.3 grams. Okay? So now you know. You can, if that medication is in grams, you have to give 0.3 of it. Okay, realistically, you're not going to give 0.3 of a gram, but maybe, a more realistic one would have been 0.5 of a gram. And if a medication was one tablet was 1 gram, and we're going to give 0.5 of it, you'd give a half of it, right? So you will come across it in ways. All right, let's double check this and make sure though, all right? Because we said, I'm going to get rid of this. We said that you can always double check your proportions if they're done correctly because the means should equal the extremes. So let's see here. This would mean that 1,000 is to 1, and you can put milligrams, gram, as 300 milligrams is to 0.3 grams, okay? Multiply, multiply. 1 times 300 is 300. 0.3 times 1,000, get your calculators out, but I promise you it's going to come out to 300. And then 300 equals 300. Okay? So that's how you can check your work. All right, now let's try another one, but let's do it concerning liquids. All right, so we're going to talk about a liquid medication. All right, so liquid going to be measured in liters or milliliters, okay, ml, milliliters. That's typically, think of cough medicines, ml, okay. What you need to remember here to do any of the problems is that it takes 1,000 ml to equal 1 liter, okay? That was in your box 6-1, all right? You have to know that. That's another thing you need to memorize, okay? All right, let's look at the problem. I'm on page 3 now. Example 2 says 2.5 liters equals how many milliliter? Okay, all right. Well, again, we start with our proportion. We need 2 ratios, 1 on each side. The one on the left is what you already know about milliliters and liters. What do you already know? This is what you already know. All right, it's always your memorization part. So 1,000 ml is to 1 L, just as, again, the important thing, whatever abbreviation you started with, you start with on the right side too. So some ml is to some L. Okay, let's fill in what we know. We know we have 2.5 liters. We don't know how many ml we have. Okay, so fill it in. 2.5 liters. X is our ml because we don't know that. How many? All right. Okay, now you have your equation. You're just going to solve. Remember, the easiest way to do this, get rid of your abbreviations so that you just see numbers, is to 1 as X is to 2.5. It just makes it easier. You're not distracted by those letters. All right, means equals the extremes. X on the left all the time. 1x, good. We don't have to divide anything because it's already as an x. 2.5 times 1,000. This is already x. When you use your calculator, or you can just move it over decimal spots, whichever you choose, I promise you, if you use a calculator, you're going to get an answer of 2,500. And then, the only thing left to do, since this was your x, you have to label it ml. So, how many ml equals 2.5 liters? 2,500 ml equals 2.5 liters. And again, if you want to double check it, we can do that. I'm going to give myself a little bit of room here. So I'll put in 1,000. I'm going to leave out the abbreviations just to make it easier to see. 1,000 is to 1, just as x 2,500 is to 2.5. The means should equal the extremes. Okay, we already did this down here. 2.5 times 1,000, we did it right here, was 2,500, right? And 1 times 2,500 is 2,500. Accurate. That is correct. Okay? Pretty simple, right? Just have a few basic theories, if you will. Equivalents, really, is what they are, to memorize, and you are set. All right. Now, let's add in some household